The Consoling Thoughts of St. Francis de Sales. Consoling thoughts on trials of an interior life, infirmities of soul and body, etc. Chapter 4. Perplexity of the heart, which loves without knowing whether it is loved. It sometimes happens that we have no consolation in the exercises of holy love, so much so that, like deaf religious, we can neither hear our voice in the choir nor enjoy the sweetness of our chant. Moreover, we are annoyed with 1,000 fears, disturbed by a tremendous hurly-burly which the enemy raises round our heart, suggesting to us that perhaps we are not agreeable to our Master, and that our love is useless or even false and vain, since it produces no consolation. We labor then not only without pleasure, but with extreme difficulty, seeing neither the good of our labor nor any content that it can afford to him for whom we labor. But what increases the misery is that the mind and reason cannot give us any kind of relief, for the superior part of the soul, being completely surrounded by the suggestions of the enemy, is in the greatest alarm, and is kept busy in guarding against being surprised by any consent to evil, so that it cannot make a sortie to set free the inferior part of the soul. And though it does not lose courage, yet it is so fiercely assaulted that if it is without blame, it is not without pain. For to fill up the cup of its misfortune, it is deprived of that general consolation which accompanies nearly all the other afflictions of this world, namely, the hope that they will soon end. The heart in these spiritual conflicts, falling into a kind of inability to think of their termination, and consequently being unconsoled by hope. Faith, indeed, residing in the summit of the soul, assures us that this trouble will end, and that we shall one day enjoy repose. But the terrific noise and shout raised by the enemy throughout the inferior part of the soul almost drown out the voice of faith, with its warnings and encouragements, leaving only on the imagination this sad reflection: I shall never be happy. Alas, how afflicted is the poor heart when it seems abandoned by love, which it seeks for everywhere and cannot find. We do not find it in the exterior senses, for they are incapable of retaining it, nor in the imagination, which is cruelly tormented by a variety of impressions, nor in the reason, which is troubled with 1,000 obscure lights and strange apprehensions. But at last we find it in the very summit of the soul, where it has all the while been residing. Yet we do not recognize it, and it does not appear to be itself, because the greatness of the darkness and sorrow prevents us from perceiving its beauty. We see it without remembering it, and meet it without knowing it, as in a dream. Thus Magdalene, meeting her dear Master, did not derive any consolation from doing so, for she did not think it was he, but only the gardener. Ah, what can the soul do in this state? It knows not how to exist amid so many enemies, and has strength only to let its will die in the will of God, imitating the sweet Jesus, who, having arrived at the height of sufferings on the cross, which his Father had prepared for him, did as the stag does when, out of breath and overtaken by the hounds, it comes at last to bay, the tear in its eye. For thus the divine Savior, approaching his death, and heaving his last sigh, with a loud cry and abundance of tears said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. Words which were his last, and by which the well-beloved Son gave the highest proof of his love to his Father. When, then, everything fails us, when our exhaustion is extreme, these words, this abandonment of our soul into the hands of our Savior, cannot fail us. The Son recommends his spirit to his Father in his last and incomparable distress. And we, racked in the convulsions of interior pains, destitute of comfort, unable to live, surrender our spirit into the hands of the eternal Son, who is our true Father, and bowing down our head in acquiescence to his good pleasure, resign our whole will to him. Here ends the reading, and thanks be to God.